So we're ready now.
Okay, just breaking up a pigeon fight. Okay, so whoever's out there on Facebook, and Zoe, let's start with closing our eyes, feeling our feet on the floor. And when I say feeling our feet on the floor, it can just be a bit of a throwaway instruction. Really coming down to the soles of our feet and acknowledging that there is experience there. There's experiences of pressure. Maybe we can feel the texture of what's under our feet, whether it's hard floor or grass, or carpet. Experience of our socks. I want us just to rock forward a little bit. You might actually keep your eyes open a bit so you've got a bit of an extra balance indicator. So I want you to rock forward a little bit onto the balls of your feet, and I just notice that the front of the ankle, the shins, the knees, the thighs, maybe even to the groins and higher, sort of buttress up to stop us from falling forward. And then as you rock yourself back to neutral, just notice how all those muscles at the front of the body calm off, or can be calmed off. You can relax them. So again, just rocking forward onto the balls of the feet, noticing how the front muscular structures of the legs buttress up. And then as you rock back to neutral, notice them easing up. And then back to your heels. So don't go too far back, especially you don't want to totter into anything that you wouldn't want to. Into the heels, and notice that the Achilles tendon, the calf, the backs of the knees, the hamstrings, maybe even up into the buttocks. They buttress up, and then as you come back to neutral, you can notice those relaxing. And then again, back into the heels, feeling the backs of the legs. Tensing up to some degree to stop us from falling, and notice that tension being able to release as we come to central. Okay, now just have a little look at your feet. Make sure that the feet are parallel. And then softening the body. I want us to again feel the soles of the feet. So we're not frozen. There's always some rocking, kind of unconscious rocking, although when we bring awareness to it, it becomes conscious. So whatever we're doing, Taichi or Qigong or yoga, there's always subtle adjustments going on for balance. I want you to really feel the soles of the feet again. And where we notice tension, so it might be very apparent to us, or it might be relatively abstract, but where we notice tension in the feet, I want us to work out what we can do to edge it towards release. How can we find a way that can soften the feet towards release? And then coming up into the ankle joints, the same procedure into the ankle joints. Now the mind goes off. The mind isn't stimulated enough by the body, especially if we are less familiar with working there. So the mind goes off to its more interesting occupations, When we notice that, just like meditation, we kindly but persistently bring our curiosity back into the experience of the body. So again, the ankles, feeling into the ankles. They're not always available to us unless we hurt them or are bending them. So we might sort of need to support the feeling inquiry by strongly visualizing into that area. Maybe we could already imagine it melting, as if it's like wax melting. Can you hear me, Zoe? Fantastic. Okay, and then we're going to come up to the knees. What I'm going to encourage us to do with the knees, as we're feeling our way around the knees, is I want us to try to work out what we would need to relax that would have a sense that the kneecaps could drop, even if it's much, much less than a millimetre. What could we relax? Maybe it feels like it's at the bottom of the quadriceps. What could we relax that feels like we could allow the kneecaps to drop? And then I want to come up into the hip joints. Again, quite a hard area to feel into if we haven't practiced. Easy if you hurt them or if you're doing a stretch. Strongly feeling into the hip joints. I want you to especially feel into where the head of the thigh bone goes into the socket of the pelvis, or at least strongly imagine into that area. And we want you to imagine that your tailbone is being pulled down by a light weight, maybe like a kilo, a bag of flour. So there's just a slight tension drawing the tailbone in. And then I want us to really push the feet into the floor. If you're like a wet clay floor, muddy floor, and you're trying to make a very strong footprint. Okay, so we'll do that again. So feeling the soles of the feet, feeling this whole surface of the skin. So we know we can do these mysterious things with our body. Regardless of what we think scientifically, we can almost imagine, or even is that actually feeling just beyond the edge of the skin, a millimetre beyond the edge of the skin. So don't try and work out whether you're making it up or whether it's actually happening. Just go with your curiosity. Be a bit loose and playful with your idea of how reality is. Imagine just feeling a millimetre beyond the skin of your feet, as if you're feeling into the ground, as if the feet are becoming continuous with the ground. And the more tightnesses we have in the feet, the more holding, the more tension, the less we're going to be able to make that contact. So really try to find ways to soften any tension. If you feel that your tension feels like it's localized, imagine the area around it. So it's almost like you could share that tension out into the areas that feel less tense. Into the ankles. Feeling into the ankles, witnessing any holding and letting go. Up into the knees. Feeling our way into the knees. Relaxing in such a way that it feels like the kneecaps can drop. And now while we're doing that, we're also going to allow the knees to just bend a little under the weight of the body. As if they're like a rusty hinge sprayed with oil. So we're not going to come down very low at all. We might just drop a centimetre or two. But we're doing that as we're relaxing the knees. And then we're going to come up to the hips. What I want us to do as we're feeling away into the hips, and it might be that the feeling really isn't presenting ourselves, just imagining this over the days, the months, the years, this will be a guide into genuinely feeling. Just literally imagining will help us in there. I want us to imagine that the thigh bone, the head of the thigh bone goes deeper into the socket. So it's as if the trunk of the body is being impaled on the thigh bone. And then we're going to draw the tailbone down. Doesn't need to be a very strong physical experience, just a slight tension. And maybe while we're doing that, we can imagine that the lumbar spine is lengthening. So we can look for more potential for relaxation. But the drawing of the tailbone lengthens the vertebrae in the lumbar away from each other. And then we're going to push the floor. We're going to allow the knees to straighten, but not lock. And if our tailbone has tucked in a lot, we can just allow it to come back to its sort of day-to-day position. And we're going to do that a few more times. So melting into the floor, as if we're standing on the floor of a lift, of an elevator, and it's dropped away from under our feet, and our bodies are very soft, as if our bodies are drunk. Our minds are not drunk, but as if our bodies are very drunk and loose. The floor's dropped away, and we follow it, softening our feet, our ankles, and when we soften our knees, we just allow them to bend a little under the weight of the body. Into the hips, as if the trunk has fallen down onto the heads of the thigh bones, tailbone drawn down. And then we're going to bounce out of this position by grounding our feet, again as if we're making a strong footprint. The body will rise up, the knees will straighten but are not locked, and we can just let the tailbone move back to its normal position. And we'll just try that one more time. Softening the feet, softening the ankles, working our curiosity up the shins and the calves, letting them loosen, letting go in the knees, allowing them to lowering them carefully, as if you were mountaineering and lowering your best friend carefully down to the rope, letting the knees drop as you allow the knees to bend. Into the hips, deep into the hips, letting the trunk fall onto the thigh bone. So now we've got this connection from the floor, at least up into the trunk. Tailbone is lightly drawn down as if it's got like a kilo weight on it, a couple of pounds of weight on it. Pushing into the floor. Don't lock the knees, just allow them to straighten. Tailbone comes back to its normal place. We're going to have the arms. What we're going to do, let me just show you for a moment. So I've got no idea who's out on Facebook doing this, but it's just me and Zoe doing this on Zoom. I know I did this with Zoe before. So I might be speeding up a little bit, but I'm sure that'll be fine. But just if you just watch for a sec, I know you can't see my feet in this Zoom, but you have a sense of the feet have, we've softened from below. And then when we come up, we push the floor and we come up, we're going to allow the arms to float up. Yeah? So I haven't got a long shirt for this, but it's almost as if someone is pulling your arms up, or someone's holding your elbow underneath. And the reason I'm saying that someone else is doing it, that if you could imagine that someone else is lifting you, and then you can allow your shoulder to stay relaxed. So again, it's as if the body is dead drunk and asleep. The mind is not drunk, the mind is well asleep. But you know what it's like when you lift someone who's in that kind of state. You lift their arms have their full weight. We want to have a sense that we're giving our full weight. Someone else is doing the work and lifting, so we don't have to lift all our shoulder up as we come. We can keep this area as best we can relaxed. Okay, so let's start again with the feet, loading with the feet. Maybe another metaphor I could throw in here is imagining that our body is like full of sand. And just like the sand in an hourglass, the top level falls as a consequence of all the levels, all the particles falling underneath. So if we imagine that at least our legs and our lower torso is full of sand, when the sand drops away in the feet, that gives the space for the sand in the ankle to drop, etc. So let's play with that metaphor. But of course, all these visual metaphors, they're very, very useful for getting to the body, but they're not finally a replacement for the feeling. They're trying to lead us into the feeling. You can still hold the metaphors in the back of the mind, but they're to encourage the actual genuine experience in the body. So let's feel the soles of the feet. Just have the tongue touching the roof of the mouth, lightly behind the top teeth. Feeling the soles of the feet. Notice where there's tension, relaxing it off. Maybe we could imagine it's like sand pouring out of our feet. And as it pours out, it gives space for the sand in the ankles to drop. So really try to feel into the ankles as you're using this image, which allows the sand in the shins and the calves to drop away, as we also strongly encourage those areas to relax. And then we come up to the knees. So again, it feels like the sand in the knees have now got somewhere to fall down into, as we're also trying to encourage the direct experience of awareness and the direct softening of any tension that we feel. The sand falls away in our thighs, up into our groins and hips and buttocks. And we strongly imagine that the area around the hip joints, the sand there has somewhere to fall into, so we can strongly at least imagine this area relaxing. And that what keeps the trunk away from the thigh bones is just liquefied, so that the trunk can drop onto the thigh bones. Tailbone draws down, and we're going to push the floor. As we do that, we're going to float up those, almost as if we're pumping them up from below. And with the same metaphor as pumping them up, if we imagine letting go from below, as if we pulled the plug on the bottom of a bouncy castle, the castle collapses, and then the arms, like the towers, the turrets, are the last things to collapse. We just do that a few times, using any of those metaphors that felt useful, encouraging ourselves to not just think that we've learned something that we can go on to automatic. There's still a value in doing this, even if we're spaced out. But one of the reasons we go on to automatic and we do space out is because, well, one thing that can lead to that is because we feel that we know everything about this movement. And actually, the more we try to keep our mind in the movement, the more richness and texture and nuance is there to discover. Maybe even an infinite amount of novelty to be able to notice in this movement alone. So always feel that we're being drawn down by emptying the feet, the arms come down, and then always feel that we come up by our increased grounding of the feet, as if we're trying to make that strong imprint onto soft earth. Yeah. Okay. Let's move from side to side. Actually, what I encourage us to do, just so that we can feel it, is to get whatever fingers feel appropriate. When I do this move, it's more like I suppose I use my middle fingers, or the fingers that sort of move together as a spatula, and literally putting them in the, I've got dark trousers on, but the inguinal crease. So if that's not a common term to you, you know, it's basically that crease across the top of the groin here. Like a doll has that, you know, dolls sort of, you know, move like that, they have that line there. So put our hands in the inguinal crease. It's just a good place to garner quite a bit of information about what we're doing. Actually, if I do that, I find my wrists get a bit stiff. So I'm going to soften, just put my thumbs there. Okay, so, and what I want us to do is just turn from side to side. Now, there's two ways we can shift weight and turn from side to side. One is to turn away from the weighted leg, one is to turn towards it. So what I'm encouraging us to do now is to turn away from the weighted leg. So when the right leg is holding more weight, we're turning anti-clockwise. And when the left leg is holding more weight, we're turning clockwise. Try to notice this area under your thumbs, or whatever you decided to use in the inguinal crease. Try to really imagine it having the capacity to soften more than it is now. So ultimately, in Taichi, a long way down the line in Taichi, if we want to be able to make our movements by different relationships of relaxation. So when we're moving now, we can't help but you know, deliberately use our muscles in such a way to get the movement, and that's fine for a long time. That's how we know how to move. But eventually, we want these movements to be able to happen because there's different areas of the body relaxing at different rates, and that allows us to make this movement. So putting our thumbs in this area here, we can start to become aware, you know, how tight it is. It needs to be fairly tight. There's you know, strong ligaments there, but also how it kind of wants to get involved in the issue. You know, it's some tensing up, like, yeah, I know how to do this. We get involved, and actually, the more we can just allow it to happen, the more we can just drop into each side and just allow the turning to happen. There's three things turning. There's turning around both of those hip joints, both of the femurs, and the whole waist is turning. Okay, so just pause for a moment. I'm going to just introduce this metaphor that I introduced yesterday, and that is, but as we're moving from one foot to the other, so when I normally move my weight, when I'm thinkingly not using Tai Chi to move my weight, it's almost, or if I've been told to move my weight, it's a bit like I know how to move the mass of my body, and I make that the initiator of the movement. But if I do it another way, where I'm relaxing into one leg, the mass moves, but it moves because I'm drawn into one side. So that might be a subtle difference, or it might be an obvious difference if that lands on your mind and your body at the moment. One thing that I've done for myself to encourage that a lot is to imagine that under one foot at a time, I'm standing on a tray with marbles underneath, or ball bearings underneath. So, yeah, sorry, Zoe, if you're the only student here and you're hearing the same metaphors again, I'll try not to use the same jokes I used yesterday, if I did any. You. Okay, so let's imagine that our left foot is on this tray with marbles underneath, and we're going to start to we'll transfer our weight onto that side from one to that, anything more complex. And as we're doing that, is it raining? If anyone else can hear us, Zoe, my facilitator, is going inside in the rain. But I might simply just be talking to you, Zoe. Okay, so under the left foot, we're standing on this this rather compromising image, this very unstable thing. And as we start to commit weight onto the left foot, we're turning the body clockwise. And then we're going to bounce out of this position, square to the front, level the weight between both feet, and then the trays under our right foot. So really strongly imagine as if this metaphor was true. Really strongly imagine as if it was literally true. So try to conduct your behavior as if it had the parameters of this visualization. And then we're going to, once we've reached where we want to go, we're going to bounce out, level the weight between both feet and square to the front. We just move from side to side. I do really suggest that we hold the image in mind because again there's the potential to space out. I know spacing out is a pejorative term, but let's say there's the potential to go to more interesting or things that we feel we need to take our mind to through whatever anxieties. So I'm suggesting that we really keep this image of these plates under our feet, because if we were standing on something that was actually could lead to an accident, we would also probably be quite mindful, wouldn't we? I'm sure if we could get very good at it, like a juggler, we could also do something else with our mind. But at the moment, if we really imagine that this situation is true, it will help draw our mind into trying to work out what would our body need to do in this situation. Fantastic. So when we're dropping down, we are doing this same process: feet, ankles, knees, and hips, and we just have to sort of trust that we've had a bit of we've kind of only done it a few times. It's inside our body, but it might be too much to be thinking about it while we're also doing it. But there's a sense that as we're coming over into one side, there's a sense that there's a release from the foot upwards. Okay, so let's play around with something entirely different, because I've used up half my repertoire for what I was going to do quickly. Probably because I'm assuming there's only one person who knows knows some of this stuff already. Let's do something else that's can be interesting. So depending on how stiff your hands are, you might not be able to do this with ease. But if your middle finger can reach over, there's a place where we got this crest in our hand here, haven't we? Under our thumb, and there's a crease where the muscle is under at the base of the little finger. And in that dip there, if we can't reach it with our finger because it's stiff, in that dip there, don't worry about it being too accurate, is an acupuncture point. And we only use, in Taichi, we can think of all the acupuncture points if we want, but we tend to only really majorly think of 7. There's 7 that are crucial. The 2 in the hands, there's 2 in the feet, there's the pelvic floor, the dantian, and the crown. So these places in the hand are very important for martial arts, very important for healing. And they, once we become familiar with them, they do feel like they're places that the mind can go to quickly, which can have an interesting response and a very good way of embodying ourselves. What I want us to do, I want to imagine those points like super glued to a balloon. So if we were imagine, and let the elbows be heavy and the shoulders. So if we were to imagine that we were squeezing this balloon, let's try and really strongly imagine what that sensation would be like. Now they're stuck to this balloon as well, so when we draw them apart, we draw them further than the balloon wants to have its natural shape. Again, imagine feeling into these places. What do you imagine? What do you feel? Actually, let's just pause for a sec. Let's just get our nail, even if we've got a blunt nail, and just give it a little prod in these areas, just to wake them up, just to remind us where this area is. And then when we feel that we've done that sufficiently, so just to remember the sort of local sensation, we're going to come back and imagine the balloon. Oh, I've got a ball over here too. So it's like we're pressing the balloon together. And when we draw it apart, imagine what that would also feel like, especially in these points of the body. I mean, it might be interesting, it is interesting to also feel it up the arms and the shoulders and the chest and the upper back. But I want us to be particularly curious about these points in the hand. And then I want us to do other things. So I want us to keep those points of the hand opposite each other, but imagine we're rotating the ball. We can rotate it in the different dimensions. So there's that way. There's that way, as if the axis was from the top to the bottom. And then there's this way, as if the axis was from the front to the back. Oh, and this way, sorry, that was the first one, as if the axis was from sides. And then just having a feel around. Make sure the elbows are heavy and the shoulders are relaxed. And while we're rotating it, we can expand and contract. Just notice what it feels like. I'm not going to try and make any suggestions, because we might not feel anything, or we might feel something. And there's another thing we can do, which is where we can twist one hand one way and one hand the other. Still feel that they're connected. Yeah. And there's another thing we can do where it's almost like we shear one hand past the other. Yeah, as if the 2 points are like both north poles of a magnet. You know, as they get across, there's something that sort of just slightly keeps them just playing around with that. We might also want to explore, if we do have a sensation, we might want to explore how far the hands go apart before that sensation is very hard to maintain it. It doesn't feel actually tangible or experiential. Okay, fantastic. Okay, that's a little interlude of the class L. And we'll come back to what we were doing before. So just remind us what we were doing, especially if anyone's joined a little later on Facebook. So the first thing we were looking at is loading the body from below, so the sense of relaxation from the feet upwards. And then when we allow that compression to spring outwards, we allow it to lift up the arms. And then again, when we start from below, we draw the arms down. So a little bit like one of these sort of toys, where you pull the thing from below. As you come down, it's a bit like the arms are tucked in. No, the arms are like. Yes. So we've been playing around with that one. And we've been doing this moving from side to side, as if we're being drawn into one side rather than simply moving our mass. Our mass does get moved, but it's not the causal factor. And we've been doing that, especially using this image of the leg that becomes more weighted, the substantial leg. We're stepping on something very unstable, like a tray with marbles on. We've been exploring those two things, so we're going to bring them together. So when we first load up, I'm going to encourage us to think feet, ankles, knees, and hips. After that, it's just too much to think about. We have to trust that that habit's got into us. So I do want us to at least feel the movements initiated from the feet. So this movement with the hands feels very lovely, but we don't really want to stick them in first. At least we can practice some feeling like they're a consequence of coming down. So we start with the feet. Okay, so let's gather ourselves, tongue touching the roof of the mouth behind the top teeth, eyes looking to our own horizon. So if we're in front of a perpendicular mirror, we'd be looking at our own eyes. So the first one, without the arms, one will be particular and systematic about the softening coming upwards. So feeling into the feet and letting go. Feeling into the ankles and letting go. Up the shins and the calves. And when we come to the knees, feeling into the knees in such a way that it feels like the kneecaps can drop. And then we're going to also allow the knees to bend. If we were supported by water, we would feel very confident in allowing the knees to bend now when the knees are relaxed. So maybe we could imagine that we're in water, so it doesn't feel like it's so threatening on the body to let the knees bend as they're up into the hip joints. Let the femurs, the head of the thigh bone, go deep into the socket. Tailbone comes down, and now we're going to bounce out of this position. As if we were deeply asleep and someone else was lifting those heavy arms for us. And then we're going to let go in the feet. The legs draw the body draws the arms. Oops, forgot to put the movement in. So let's do the next one. We'll push our way up. And then this time, as we're coming down, we're going to imagine our left foot is on this tray with marbles underneath. So as we're drawing the arms down, we're turning the waist. We're turning the waist clockwise. Just let the arms wrap gently around the body a little bit. And then we're going to push out of that compressed position under the left foot, as if we want to make a real strong footprint in the ground. Turn the body to the front as we're distributing the weight between both feet. And now this compromising tray is under the right foot, and the waist turns anti-clockwise. Right hand just gently skins in front of the body, and then we bounce out of that position and squat it. So just following these movements, maybe settle on one metaphor that you've already used, that I've already introduced, that you connect with. Maybe some other image has come up, some sort of tactile image has come up and you want to follow that. Well, one reason I'm really encouraging us to stay with these things is because at least it's a way for our mind to hook in to our bodies, and that is both keeps us interested in what we're doing, and it gives us a place where we're not going off to our particular concerns or working out what we're going to be doing next with our lives. So using the metaphor, whichever one it is, to keep our mind connected with the inquiry of the movement. So we did that thing a moment ago with the imagining the balloon. If we can remember all those places in the palms of the hand, next time we are coming down, maybe we can imagine on those places in the palm of the hand, we're pushing like bamboo sticks into soft earth. Now, it won't completely work. It might work just for the beginning of it, because they'll feel like they'll have to bend and go all over the place. But doing that as if a sense that we got a subtle pressure on that part of the body. So we're working, it both helps enliven those hands, and it works with something that's very good altogether in Tai Chi is to imagine we're moving against a certain amount of resistance. Moving against it and constantly breaking through it. So we could use those places in the palms of our hands, the Lao-Gum point, pericardium 8. And imagine that we're pushing something deep into the earth. Tongue touching the roof of the mouth behind the top teeth. I want us to imagine that we are like a kitten being picked up by our mum. And as we know, kittens, the mother cat picks up the kittens by the scruff of the neck, and the kittens are completely unfazed by this. They're still completely relaxed. So if something was gently holding us at the back of the skull, so it's giving a sense of lift, but actually everything else can melt down. The whole back of the neck, the upper body, the upper back, the middle back, the lumbar, the tailbone. Maybe we can imagine the tailbone and the pelvis being heavier. Maybe we can imagine it's made of gold. It's very dense and heavy. So it can, the whole spine can hang away from this area where we're held at the back of the skull. Keep folding the curiosity of the mind back into the experiencing. Okay, let's just pause for a sec, and I'll talk a little bit about the dantian. So the dantian is often identified by its location. That isn't always entirely helpful, and the way that I get into it, partly because after trying to get there for a long time, through almost like my head trying to discover through the instructions, the sensation came up that just reminded me of my childhood. And the sensation is, well, at least the sensation, the location of the sensation is being driven over a humpback bridge, or a crest of a hill, or swinging in a swing. So we all know we get that funny feeling. Well, at least I remember, you know, me and my siblings acknowledging that funny feeling as a kid. I'm sure that's how it happened probably to most of us. So shut our eyes for a moment and using that memory to locate this place. So try not to get caught up in the memories, nostalgia, or traumas of being driven over the brow of a hill and with your siblings. And using that memory to locate this place. Don't worry if it feels a bit smudged, or it definitely doesn't want to feel like it's a pinpoint, but it's just trying to get a local sense of this, somewhere between the navel and the top of the pubic bone, and a little bit into the body. One way that has felt useful for me to think about this area is to think of it like a squash ball. And the reason I pick a squash ball is because it's a good size to work with, but a squash ball has two other qualities. So it's got a bit of give in it. It's a bit squishy, but it's not that squishy. It's not like, you know, a collapse under your fingers like a ping pong ball might. Yeah. So it's got a certain amount of substance, but it's not brittle like a marble. And what I want us to do is we're going to move from side to side. When we move from side to side, I want to imagine this place in the body is rotating like this, yeah? So as if the axis of it was top to bottom. and it's rotating like this. And you know, it probably makes sense to, or what I encourage us to do is that when we come in here, it rotates that way, brings us back and rotates the other way. What I would also like us to do is imagine that that is leading the movement. So if you imagine you watch my t-shirt, the dantian was turning, and it's turning at the center, and of course as I twist my t-shirt I get movement right to the periphery. So you can imagine your dantian is turning and it's causing the movements around the body. And maybe you can imagine that you know, using this metaphor of turning cloth from the middle, you know, trying to work out whether your cloth of your body is like silk or overstarched linen. Yeah. And we'll come back to that original movement, and we'll just do it for another 5 or 10 moments. Yeah, but we just added in these other couple of images. So make the first loading up quite mindful and systematic, letting go in the feet. Maybe you can imagine the feet spreading onto the floor, ankles, knees, hips, tailbone drop down, bouncing out of this position. The knees are straightening but not blocking. Arms coming up. We've got that plate under one foot as we turn. And once we get into the swing of it, no pun intended, we're going back to the familiarity of the movement that we were doing earlier. We can just let that be slightly habitual, but now just imagining what would it be like if it was literally the causal factor or the initiating factor was that turning of that place in the belly. And as it turned, just as we saw the cloth, the turning in the cloth eventually results in movement further and further away from the epicenter. We can imagine that that turning is making the movement right up to our fingertips. And then just let's move. Maybe we can come to some of these metaphors, but don't use the metaphors try not to use the metaphors as strict boundaries. Yeah, if it feels like they're useful to touch base with them, but what I want us to do is make sure that our priority now is relaxation, or our priorities are relaxation, looking for any sources of pleasure in the movement and any sources of flow and connectivity. Again, without it being pushy. Let this last few minutes enjoy the fruits of our hard work, of our disciplined work. So we still don't really want to space out. We want to bring the curiosity within. We're looking for pleasure, maximizing relaxation, any qualities of vitality, or energy, any qualities where it feels like there's a flow of experience across parts of the body. It makes sense to breathe in when the arms are up because the rib cage has got more space. Feeling right into the fingertips. Prioritizing relaxation, any senses of pleasure, even if it's simply the psychological pleasure of knowing that we've made an effort. If the mind goes off, when we come back, maybe we can look into one of the metaphors that work for us to seek our way back into the experience of the body. And once we're there, try not to hold the experience too tightly with any of those metaphors. Go back to a more holistic, gestalt sense of the relaxed body moving. So all those things that are demanding our attention, we can look at them later. We're not being irresponsible if they're anxiety-provoking things. We can attend to them later. Maybe we can attend to them better if we've had a space to relax. So every time we notice that our mind has gone out, finding ways to draw our interest back into the experience of it. And then we'll make that the last one, coming to the front, allowing the arms to come down, closing the eyes, and feeling the experience of the body, especially the feelings in the hands. Trying neither to explain nor explain away your experience. And then allowing the eyes to open and letting in shape and colour into the eye consciousness. Just giving ourselves a little bit of shake off, as if we were shaking water off the tips of our fingers, as if we were trying to kick off a Wellington boot, one foot at a time. And yeah. So normally I finish this early for questions. I'm not expecting you to have any questions, Zoe, or need to ask any questions. And I've got no idea who's out there on Facebook, so apologies if it's 5 minutes before the prescribed end.
Okay. Thank you, Dharmakara.
Yeah, you're welcome. How was that doing that 2 days in a row? Did